Happy Tuesday, July 9th, 2024. Hope you're having a good one. I wanted to talk a little bit today and then I'll open up a panel. Um, First thing is the GOP platform came out yesterday. I'm not going to go over it, but I just have a few tiny little thoughts on some things. Um, they haven't updated in like 8 years or something since I think 2016. And I like this one a lot better. They took out the gay marriage stuff. They they took out like most of the culture war stuff, honestly, except abortion. And even that, it looks like they're kind of willing to leave to the states. So it did not make the what Pew calls the faith and flag conservatives. Remember that Satanism clip we listened to the other day that talked about the ones that can't separate God from the flag? It's those. Like they're finally forced, or it's finally been separated for them. So what I realized after reading the platform, there's a few groups that in my generation, let's say, I don't know, like 25 years ago, let's say mid 2000s, that were really dominant on the political scene. And that was the Christian right, the evangelicals, the God people, the faith and flags. We had George Bush as the president, and the gays. The gay, back then it was mostly called gay or gay and lesbian. Rarely did the B come into it. Certainly not any of the other letters, although we did have some trans people back then here and there. Larger cities, a few larger cities had queer, but for the most part it was gay and gay marriage and gay rights. And after reading this platform, I think those two groups they're done. They're gone. Their part is over, at least on the political scene. The God people, it looks like there's not a party out there anymore that's going to specifically like feature your particular values. Now they did keep stuff about the family and the nuclear family, which I 100% support. My generation of gays always wanted to be part of that family. Like two men can be a nucleus of a family as well. I still think that boys need men for the most part. And girls I can't really speak for. So they kept that kind of stuff, but our goal was always to join marriage. And so I definitely defend the nuclear family and marriage and all of that. And so the gays in my generation kind of just disappeared into the conservative nuclear family marriage defending party right now. But gay itself is almost not a thing anymore. It's like a category I can now check off, which I'm glad I fought very hard for. I'm happy I get to see the day where it's a non-issue. It's like being left-handed or tall or short or something. It's just it's so insignificant and inconsequential of a category by now. So it doesn't feature in the Republican Party platform at all. Like gays are normalized. The left, if you're a gay that somehow still feels oppressed, even though there's nothing in the Republican Party platform oppressing you any longer, then you have the D, the Democrat Party, and the TQ, all that stuff. So I have a feeling like what little gay is left is going to shift over there. But the gay I'm talking about, the traditional two guys just wanted to settle down and have a relationship, like kind of like Mike and I were, that nobody cares anymore. Like if you have neighbors and they're two guys and they live together, there's so many other things people are worried about nowadays. So I think gay and maybe lesbian is a quaint thing of the past. And the bi, we looked at the statistics the other day, is actually the highest in the current polling. There's more people identifying as bi than any other category. I think it was something like 13% of the 72% total. The other group is the God group, the evangelicals, the Christian right that everybody is so scared of. They got completely written out of the platform, at least their specific values. So the gays of the Bush era and the Christian right of the Bush era are almost non-players on the scene anymore. They've kind of been absorbed into mainstream culture, I guess. And it looks like it's the TQ, genderqueer, feminist, racialist, whatever on the left. What's really on the right anymore? Other than, to me, normalcy. I guess abortion, in a way, still. Nuclear family, traditional. To me, what would be traditional American values are now somehow traditional conservative values. So I want to share that. And then there is a Twitter thread I want to take a look at, that Wocal Distance. If you don't know him, he's a great follow. I'll put the thread in the comments. There you go. I found some more, or rather he found some more of that equity bullshit, DEI stuff. So I'm gonna I guess I'll share my screen. I just want to go over this a little bit to show this is one more example. So some of the commenters the other day that were saying this, I'm conspiracy brained and propagandized, and this is not really out there. Let's take a look. The National Science Foundation gave $270 million to bring critical social justice woke into science. I want to see what this, the NSF. The U.S. National Science Foundation is an independent agency of the United States federal government that supports fundamental research and education. I wonder if this is going to come under Chevron, that ruling about independent agencies. They support fundamental research and education in all the non-medical fields of science and engineering. And then the medical counterpart is the NIH, National Institute of Health. So those two things cover science, the National Science Foundations. Okay. The NSF Advanced Program exists solely to advance gender equity using the intersectionality framework of critical race theory, the woke corruption of science. Okay, let's look. U.S. National Science Foundation. Advance, that's the name of this initiative. Organizational change for gender equity and STEM academic professions. So, yep, okay, that's in there. Advance at a glance. He underlines this part. Since 2001, wow. That's way back even in the time period I was just talking about. All right, so since that time, so like for the last 23 years, they've invested over $270 million to support advanced projects at more than 100 institutions of higher education. So that's the academies, and STEM-related not-for-profit organizations in 41 states, DC, Puerto Rico, etc. All advanced proposals are expected to take an intersectional perspective and consider the salient categories of social identity when appropriate. Okay, when appropriate. Well, what if not ever appropriate in certain types of science? Problem solved. This is people send their proposals for research to get it funded. This is where the money comes from. And so now when they send in their proposals, their proposals have to be framed in this intersectional lens. Advanced proposals should offer strategies to promote equity for all faculty. And that's just the first tweet, y'all. Hang on, how'd I get out of here? All right. He says this next bit is key. The NSF is the federal agency that funds science and engineering in the United States, accounting for 25% of all science funding in the U.S. So that's a good concrete number. Wokeness is 25%. It's 1/4 in the Science Institute, the federal science institutions. So that's a metric, a quantitative metric. It has 25%. I'm going to say corrupted installed itself somehow into our national science foundations. The NSF plays a huge role in deciding which research and which ideas get funded. Okay. Is an independent federal agency, is established in 1950 by Congress to promote the progress of science. Good. Advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare. Good. That's from the preamble. Secure the national defense. We fulfill our mission chiefly by making grants. So they hand out money. Our investments account for about 25% of federal support to America's colleges and universities for basic research. They say research driven by curiosity and discovery. But your curiosity seems to stop when it reaches the conclusion that you want it to reach. It doesn't seem to go, because we saw what happens when you apply hard science to it. It breaks down, it poops, like starts to fizzle. So your curiosity only goes so far, and so does your discovery. There's something else competing with that. All right. The NSF can do two things. They can signal to the rest of the scientific community about which research goals should be adopted. That doesn't mean the rest of the scientific community has to listen, especially if they're doing authentic science. They just need to continue to follow the science. So one, I'm less worried about this signaling thing. Use its funding power to incentivize scientists to go in the direction it wants. Right. And then as it does that, it generates more evidence to support these junk science superstitions. The entire goal is to fund DEI projects in science. Okay, read that again. To fund DEI projects in science. DEI in science. And this is the US government, the federal foundation. So those of you that's telling me it's not in the government, I've already looked at Washington State's entire State Department of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, a government department. And now I looked at it in mental health on the federal level. They have the Bureau of Behavioral Health Equity or something. And now I'm looking at it in the National Science Foundations. So it's in there. So those of you that want to keep gaslighting and saying this is a conspiracy, it's a conspiracy that is turning out to be true. The guidelines make it clear that the DEI framework adopts many of the worst ideas from postmodernism, critical race theory, and neo-Marxism. That's that Frankenstein monster, like philosophical, whatever they put together. Because that's why it doesn't hold up logically, because it's drawing on so many different philosophical traditions. They don't all cohere. All right, this is their fact sheet. Look at this. It's the same type of stuff. And this all happened under Biden. This wasn't this they were funding since 2001. But Biden put a bunch of equity. He did a bunch of equity initiatives. I don't think this could have happened under Trump. What do you mean by a symptom of systemic inequity? Oh God, I've been asking that question for over 4 years now. I never get an answer that makes sense, ever. Are there any resources to learn more about systemic inequities? Are there any resources to learn more about intersectionality? And then here's the resources, the answers. Center for Gender Equity in Science and Technology. Wow, the Gender Equity Project, Gendered Innovations. The list just goes on and on. All right. The reason that we know the NSF is using concepts from CRT and critical social justice is because the NSF included a bibliography of sources which we can use. Oh, I love this. I love sources. This is what I wish more people would provide. I know it's going to be hard to see. Let me. Here, I'm going to. Hopefully, y'all can see this. Office on Sexual Orientation and Gender Diversity. Strategies for Affecting Gender Equity and Institutional Change. Let me see if some of these names come from queer theory. Oh, he only put part of the page. Okay. Let me. All right, are we back on the Twitter page? Queer Identities in Material Science and Engineering is about heterosexual privilege in science. That I got some thoughts on that too. How sexual identity is about cultural heterosexual hegemony and about getting the American Society for Engineering to do year-long LGBTQ plus train. What do they need trained in? What? I'm LGBT myself. What do I need trained in? Or what do other people need trained in? Wow. The impacts of identity on self-efficacy are inherent to both imposter syndrome and stereotype threat. I have imposter syndrome. I want to look at what stereotype threat is. But none of this has to do with engineering. Like, what does my imposter syndrome have to do with any of this? All right, we'll find out from the AI. Back to this. Sexual identity is framed primarily by the hegemony of heterosexual binary gender people who set a heteronormative context and social rules for the workplace. What? I've had a lot of issues in the workplace. Like I could have write volumes on my workplace issues, and not a single one of them were around sexuality or whether I was straight or not. That never even came up. Even absent hostility or intentional, they're living in the past where people still hate gay people. Without ill intent, the assumption often is that everyone is heterosexual. Maybe 30 years ago, I don't think anybody cares. I don't think has anything to do with engineering or science. Heteronormativity, which establishes that heterosexuality is normal and privileged. Okay, this is a conspiracy theory, just like the patriarchy, just like the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, just like white supremacy, systemic racism. This is all conspiracy. That there's this. All right, I'm going to hang on. Let me take a little break. I'll catch up on some comments too. I've been watching the American Revolution documentaries, and it seems like what happened is the British government overreached at some point with things like the Stamp Act, taxing people without their ability to participate in the process, like this top-down imposition. And they experienced that as a tyranny, like the way their value systems were set, that was one line too far into the experience of tyranny. But every rebellion, like every revolutionary, fiery rebel, like hardens into the iron of its own tyranny at some point. So whatever starts out as a rebellion, there's a kind of an implicit tyranny built into that. So the founding fathers were the rebels. Like William Blake has the mythological cycle of Ark and Urizen, and Ark the rebel eventually turns into Urizen the tyrant, I guess. Over organization, over structured. So eventually the United States got its independence, and it settled into some kind of stable system of its own, which of course became experienced as a tyranny by many minority groups, outsider groups, etc. And we overthrew and corrected some of that, a lot of that. We did civil war, civil rights, women got the vote, the franchise got extended, etc. So we've minimized some of that tyranny, but there are some groups still, and I think they're fringe, and I think they're minority, and I think they're on the extremes, that experience the United States, like living in the US, the same way that the revolutionaries experienced living under British rule at the time. Like they feel like they're being imposed upon, controlled, told what to do, etc. And I see it from both sides, actually. But the woke version of it, there's something called, oh, sure, Moose, I'll send it to you in the back. I was going to send it to you when I opened the panel, but I get you. 1 second. I'll shoot it to you on Discord. And I've talked about this before, but in 1990, a group called Queer Nation started, and they had a group a few years earlier called ACT UP, which started to fight the AIDS crisis. And it's debatable that ACT UP may have been needed at the time. There was not a lot of action being taken on AIDS and HIV at the time, and ACT UP kind of helped to spur that. So ACT UP itself might have actually might have been the right tool at the right time. But this other thing called Queer Nation rose up a few years later, and it was like the militant version of the gay rights movement, that they did not want gay marriage. They saw that as assimilating to the heteronormative patriarchy, and they wanted a completely different society that was normed around them. And they saw heterosexual norms, things like male-female relationships, straight people, nuclear family, etc., as oppressive, as a form of tyranny. This is all in their head. It's subjective. It's psychological, unless they could point to an actual policy, like we had marriage, which we could point to and said, see, this policy excludes us. Barring something like that, this is a subjective oppression in mental health, what's called internalized oppression. Moose, you want me to bring you back, or can you stream from here? I'll just, hey, welcome. I think he's just setting up the stream. What was I saying? So that's where this, like, the heteronormativity stuff that we just read is queer ideology. I remember it all the way back from the 1990s. Nobody took them seriously. They were only in a few major cities, some of them on the West Coast. I think Houston had one. The mainstream majority of the gay movement probably did not come into contact with Queer Nation or queer ideology or queer ideas. Now that gay is no more, we're just ordinary Americans now, assimilated into mainstream marriage, nuclear family. What's left over is the trans and the queer, and they kind of like are the new wave that have taken the structure that we created for the gay rights movement and have repurposed it for their own agenda, which includes crap like this, the heteronormativity thing, and gender ideology, etc. Okay, before I get back to the tweet, stereotype threat. It talked about imposter syndrome and stereotype threat, and I have no idea how that relates to heteronormativity at all, but I'll try to figure it out. Stereotype threat is a psychological phenomenon, as so much of this stuff seems to be. I wonder if mental health professionals could not be part of the solution instead of cramming DEI wokeness down everybody's throat. Where someone feels anxious, okay, again, it's about the feelings, feels anxious about confirming a negative stereotype about their social group. Oh my God. So like if you're Black, you have this anxiety, like actual mental distress that you're going to come across in a way that reinforces Black stereotypes. So like if you're Black and you eat fried chicken, you have anxiety that that's going to reinforce a negative stereotype. This is neurosis. This is neurosis. These people need therapists and mental health professionals and support groups. The rest of society doesn't need to do anything for these people's mental health and anxiety. Nothing. In fact, we'd be doing them a favor by not doing anything and telling them to handle it. Like, this is your internal world. Go get it handled like the rest of us are doing. They say, here's a breakdown. Being aware of a negative stereotype, feeling like you could conform to the stereotype, performance, then it could cause performance anxiety and reduce focus because it takes up mental resources. So instead of being able to do your job and you have 100% of your bandwidth focused on your job, you now have like 10 or 20% of it focused on this anxiety that somehow, as you're doing your job, you might reinforce a negative stereotype. That was taught. Toddlers don't come into the world thinking this kind of stuff. That was put into somebody's head. If y'all want to talk about programming, I'm finding it right here. That's what this looks like. And then it could potentially lower your performance. So then if your performance falls at work, instead of your own competency, it's because you had anxiety about living at, oh my God, I can't believe the federal government is reinforcing this stuff. This is why I'm not voting for Biden. I want this stuff out of our government. I don't care if people put it in nonprofits or private organizations or whatever, but um uh-oh, you can't hear me. Can y'all hear me? Please tell me y'all can hear me. Um Hi, Mossad. Can fuck. Did I just waste half an hour of no microphone? Okay, good. All right, I'm gonna get back to that tweet. This is really, it's like if astrology was suddenly made an official federal, like, valid concept, and then all the policies started being made around astrology. This is how crazy this stuff is. Next is intersectionality and quantitative psychological research, blah, blah, blah. We conclude that it is most useful. We argue that social constructions and standpoint epistemologies, that's wokeness, by the way, are most compatible with intersectionality as a critical theory and approach, given the attention to the role of power in constructing knowledge and the socially constructed nature of social categories. This is an ideology that knowledge is constructed by power and not by following the evidence, by induction and deduction. These ideas come from neo-Marxist and postmodern literature on critical social justice. The critical thinking tradition is concerned primarily with epistemic adequacy. To be critical is to show good judgment in recognizing which arguments are faulty, assertions lack evidence, truth claims appeal to unreliable sources, and concepts are sloppily crafted and applied. I want to frame this. I want to needlepoint this and cross stitch it, because this is the same shit that I try to do on here every day that people complain about. So yes, the critical thinking tradition, the Socratic, Platonic, even pre-Socratic and sophistic, Aristotelian, Greek critical thinking tradition. Absolutely, yes. In this tradition, sloppy claims can be identified and fixed by learning to apply the tools of formal and informal logic correctly. Yes, this is the Western intellectual tradition that I've been featuring on this stream. Here is the alternative progressive leftist tradition. Critical pedagogy begins from a different set of assumptions rooted in neo-Marxian literature on critical theory, commonly associated with the Frankfurt School. Here, the critical learner is someone who is empowered and motivated to seek justice and emancipation. So they're not looking for knowledge. They're looking for the power to liberate themselves and others. Critical pedagogy regards the claims that students make in response to social justice issues not as propositions to be assessed for their truth value, but as expressions of power that function to reinscribe and perpetuate social inequalities. What did I just say? They believe when like you're reading a scientific paper, it's not a paper designed to describe reality or the world as it is. It's a paper designed to reinforce existing power structures. So when they read the paper, they look for all the little ways, the language it uses, the tone, etc., the sources, to show that it's upholding this power structure that's keeping them oppressed. This is what is in this National Science Foundation thing. I don't think I'm going to go through all of it, but I want you to have an idea that it is in there now as we speak. It's not a fear that could be, maybe is coming. Knowledge is socially constructive, but not relative. A knower constructs knowledge from a particular location. I don't think we need to get into that part. If you I don't want to go into standpoint epistemology today, but maybe I have to. Let me pull up the AI and see if I can get a summary. It's a form of epistemology where, depending on your position in the social hierarchy, you like the oppressed people have a certain knowledge from being oppressed that people that are not oppressed don't have. And so instead of logic, it's kind of like playing the race card in a sense. Instead of logic, you can I'll just get the AI to do it. It's kind of appeal from experience, which I don't necessarily oppose because I do it myself in my work. But I don't claim that my personal experience is a path to objective knowledge for all people, which is sort of what standpoint epistemology claims. Right. Okay. So things like gender, race, class, etc., shape how we perceive and understand the world. So our social position and demographics influences the knowledge we have, and that groups that are marginalized or oppressed have a privileged aspect to understanding certain aspects of society because of that marginalization and suppression. So they know and understand things about the world that only an oppressed person can know. So they have a superior knowledge or epistemology because of their position in the social hierarchy. Um, I'm not going to go through this whole thread. To recap, the NSF has a grant whose goal is advancing DEI in science. The grant criteria requires an intersectional analysis. The papers cited by the NSF state plainly that intersectionality is a critical theory compatible with standpoint epistemology. A focus of intersectionality is critical praxis, which is about using critical social justice ideology and ideas to criticize the world and building practices to change the world. And when they say the world, they mean existing normative values, the values that they believe are oppressing people that don't conform to those values: straightness, whiteness, maleness, religion, particularly Christianity, etc. You can read the Drag Queen Story Hour paper with Little Hot Mess and some other guy that goes through how they want to use Drag Queen Story Hour as part of an educational agenda to change the educational norms that are used to teach kids. They lay it out in much detail. The NSF created a grant to advance DEI, which requires applicants to adopt intersectionality. So in order to get the money, you have to adopt this framework, this superstitious framework, like astrology, not validated by actual science. But to get the government money, you now have to work from within it. The NSF say intersectionality itself assumes the validity of ideas from neo-Marxism, postmodernism, critical race theory, and also that intersectionality assumes the moral and political goals of social justice. Look at that. Moral and political goals in science, in mental health, in education. The NSF is using government funding to get scientists to do research that advances DEI, accepts social justice ideology, and use broken methods from critical theory and postmodernism. This is political corruption, absolutely 100%. If you want the corruption out of government, don't vote for it. It is requiring that scientists adopt broken methods like standpoint epistemology in order to advance a particular political ideology within science and to make critical social justice the goal of science rather than making truth the ultimate goal of science. It's that shift from truth to power. Truth becomes an expedient that gets sacrificed to power. They want the truth that gives them the most power. They don't want the truth that corresponds to actual reality. Program contacts. Very often, the people who push woke are bureaucrats who get pushed around by woke activists, but those bureaucrats need to be held accountable, and the people responsible for this program need to be held accountable for laundering in illiberal and anti-scientific methods. Absolutely. If they are not strong enough to stand up to woke activists, or if they don't understand what exactly is going on in the academic papers they are telling scientists to read, then they need to be working somewhere else. Oh, sorry, I had stopped sharing the screen. Anyway, that is the thread on woke science. Your mic card is stressed. What does that mean? Fuck. Oh, hey, oh, Tommy Temper. Yeah. Hey, Tommy, if you're watching, I remember you. Oh, okay. Let me put the link. I've pretty much said what I have to say about this crap. Y'all talk about degeneracy, like moral degeneracy and all that. This is rational degeneracy. It's the degeneracy of intelligence and critical thinking and truth. That's the kind of degeneracy I'm against. All right, panel is open. Oops. There we go. Hey, Plasma. So what does a stressed mic cord mean? I mean, it is going out. I know that. Is it like shorting? Hmm. See, this is why I need to find some funding because all of this could use an upgrade. It also keeps lowering my mic volume in Windows itself, and I don't know why. Ooh, it does look like. Hang on. That's weird. Let me check something. I'm going to go off camera real quick to check. Can y'all hear me? How is my mic? Shit, I might have to shut this down. So StreamYard is showing the mic working. It's showing the correct mic. It's giving me the little bars when I talk, etc. But then the audio software that controls the mic itself is not detecting the mic at all. And it usually does. The mic usually shows up. So that's an indication that it says unsupported microphone. I just want to make sure. Okay, you can hear me. All right. Is the level normal ish? Will it get me through a stream? Okay. Oh, all right. I think what's happening is the people like me that were Democrats are shifting over to the Republican side, and because that's the party that's making the most sense right now. This DEI stuff is just it's just one example of the crazy, but it's at the root of so much of it. Because it has that systemic component to it that they feel they can solve it at a systemic level. Let me check the news. It's still Biden. Is he going to run? Blah, blah, I don't know. Probably, unless he steps down. I'm not voting for him. He's the one that put all this stuff in the government. It wasn't there in 2020. He had the equity order. In fact, Trump had an order. I went over this on the stream the other day, specifically keeping this stuff out of government. And a judge found that some of it was unconstitutional because it involved banning speech, which I agree with. And Biden came in and revoked that order and put in another one of his own that did almost the opposite. Yeah, that's why I'm an enlightened centrist. Radically enlightened. Very radically, apparently. I guess I am the true radical by just sticking with norms that have always, like, I've talked about this before. And if you take just the academy itself, it there were certain standards that just did not hold, and the people that were in charge of those standards, for the most part, were men at the time, and it's the men that some men let these changes in. I saw it in the men's group when they were one of the Indian tribe, the Lakota, I think, filed this big complaint, and they wrote this letter that some of the stuff we were doing in the men's group was cultural appropriation, and they wanted a cut of the royalties and something. And some people in the men's group said, well, that's their problem. We're not doing anything wrong. Nobody owns these procedures. But then some men kind of bought into that and started pushing for changing the way they do things. And that's the men that won out. And there was like this political struggle. I came in kind of at the tail end of it, so I caught the aftermath. But there was this like political struggle between men, within men, and the side that felt like they were hurting the Lakota and being offensive and doing something bad and wrong won out. That sense of guilt or shame, or wanting to be morally righteous or do the right thing. But the right thing for who? The Lakota or for the men that you set up to serve? Because that's where your priorities should be. And if what you're doing is helping those men, there's no reason you should change it just because some other group that's not even the group you're set up to serve has an opinion about it. And that's where I lost respect for the leadership that tilted it the opposite way that I would have gone. So it's not being able to hold boundaries. And I think that's one, not saying that women can't be good at it or not good at it. I just associate it particularly with men. Like if I'm going to put together a team of people to hold boundaries, and I had a room full of people to select from, I would probably tend to select more men than women. So maybe that's my bias, but it just seems to work for me. And the boundaries did not hold. And I see that on these streams too with the white knighting. Like if a woman starts signaling distress, some of those men, their boundaries kind of weaken. And to me, I've just seen that so many times in my life, be open to manipulation and exploitation. So I'm very alert to it. All right. Well, I will go for 15 more minutes then. And if there's no panel, there's no panel. I'm just trying to be here every day, at least. Keeping the space open in case somebody needs it. Let me see what else about Twitter. Oh, let's check in with the Satanist. Oh, yeah. I wanted to show this tweet. How do I do it? Just kind of how the mind works. We see that on here sometimes too. This is a guy that thinks that this. Who is this anyway? Is this. I don't know what country this is, but anyway, he thinks that this looks like a shot from a dystopian movie. The symmetry, the shininess, it doesn't look that shiny to me. Oh, the table. The flags that look like cones, the guards with the capes. Everything says dictator. Well, to him, that's so subjective. But I think, like, when people look at the Vatican audience hall and see the snake, people's minds can take little tiny, like, non-consequential details and put them together into some story or movie scene. And I think that's just so interesting that he sees all that in that photo. My mind would not have picked that out and put it together. And now he's convinced that, ooh, scary dictatorship. Oh, let me back to Twitter. Oh yeah, the Satanist. Hang on. Oh, what's this? Oh, never mind. Nope, I don't see anything interesting on Satan Twitter right now either. Oh well, let's see who's streaming. Angel Misfits World Order. What? Okay, I'm not going to stream that, but I will put Angel's link. He's streaming right now. I'm also trying to figure out the best time to stream. I've kind of been doing it when the urge hits me. It seems to be, for me, late morning, midday ish for most people. And then I usually do one in the evenings, more or less consistently. But I want to stream when the people are going to be around. So I need to pay attention to that too. Well, I guess I could wrap it up. There's no point in sitting on here pretending I have something to say. What I really wanted to underscore, because this goes along with the other streams I've been doing on this stuff, is that it is in policy. We're not imagining this stuff. Some of us think it's bad. We think it's based on faulty premises. We think it's divisive. We think it's an inaccurate reflection of what's in the minds and hearts of most Americans. I don't think you're living under tyranny or oppression. You can't point to any concrete policy like the Stamp Act, which the founding fathers could point to indicate oppression. To me, it's subjective, and some good mental health care and self-care would help with that. Resiliency, anti-fragility, achieving an internal locus of control, etc. Way more effective, I think, than pouring all this millions of billions into this bureaucratic apparatus to police the rest of us. That's just my one citizen's thought, and I'm going to express that thought with my vote in November this year, and I look forward to doing it. I need to figure out what's going on with this mic. Why is it unsupported? I don't know. Open control panel. Yeah, anyway, I don't know what's going on with the mic. I guess I'll end it, especially if the mic is shorting out. All right. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed your coffee as much as I did. Stay cool. As an enlightened centrist, I don't want to tell you what political opinions to have. I really don't. If you see merit in the stuff I'm discussing, the systemic racism, implicit bias, intersectionality, standpoint epistemology, etc., stereotype threat, Come up and talk about it. I'm open to hear your side of it. I just can't make it make sense to me. It doesn't rise beyond the astrology level. So keep being you and keep coming back again. Oh, hey Bex, are y'all around? Is it time? Do y'all want to go hit the island? Chill on the island a little bit. Enjoy a nice volcano or two. Let me see if our dude is around. So yeah, thanks for being here, and I think I'm gonna head to Discord and catch you at the next one tonight or tomorrow. Thanks again and take care.